For a long time now, I've been wanting to sit down and really learn anatomy, but in a structured way. You know, dedicating time to studying and understanding every part of the body. And my ultimate goal is to draw the human form from imagination, from all sorts of different angles and perspectives. Plus, I want to simplify the human form so that when I use a reference, I can tweak it and make the pose more dynamic and interesting. Today, I'm gonna take you along on how I approach these big goals and will eventually end up with a full study plan for learning to draw anatomy. So the first part of this was actually starting. And I did this with figure drawing. That is the process you'll be seeing in the video today. The beginning of my anatomy journey. Figure drawing is when you draw the human form from a reference, either from real life or a photo, with the focus of observing the simple forms, lines, and flow in a human body, but in a short amount of time. And this can range anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes or 20 minutes. It takes your knowledge of anatomy from theory to practice. It's what helps you to understand how muscles and bones moves together, and it's gonna make your art more lifelike and dynamic. By practicing this, you learn to notice the subtle details in human movement and form, so not the actual details. You also improve your ability to draw different body types and different proportions. Over time, this practice builds muscle memory, which means you'll be able to draw faster and more naturally. But most importantly, figure drawing helps you see where your current skills are lacking, so you know exactly what to focus on next. And that is exactly what we need for step 2. Assessing your current knowledge. For step 2, you want to assess what you already know and what areas need work. You can do this by paying attention to where you struggled in the process. But you can also look at what looked off for you in the end result. I usually do this by holding my work up to a mirror or just flipping the canvas. This way you look at it in a different way and easily spot mistakes. The things you already know are easy to spot. This is just what feels natural to you when you're drawing, and the things that look good in the end result. And also, you can explain to yourself why you do it and why it works. Here's what I found for myself. I'm already pretty familiar with the basic proportions and ratios of the human body. However, I sometimes get unsure when placing guidelines, and I end up relying on my eye rather than structure. I have a decent knowledge of the head structure, but I've never really studied or drawn the actual bones of the skull. And that leads on to the next point, which that my knowledge of the skeleton as a whole is pretty much non-existent, except what I learned in biology in 8th grade. I do understand simple forms that represent parts of the body, and I can draw them without reference. But when it comes to putting it all together, I sometimes struggle to make the entire body look correct. And then finally, my knowledge of muscles is basically zero. Now that I know where I stand, it's time for step 3. And this includes setting clear goals for what my abilities should look like by the end of the journey. And when I have those big goals, I'll break it down into smaller sub-goals and link those sub-goals to actionable steps. The key here is to be realistic about how much time and effort you can commit, so you don't set yourself up for frustration. And then here is my structured study plan for anatomy. So first up, we've got my big goal, and that is drawing the human form from imagination. This is super important because being able to create figures and characters without relying on references opens up a whole new world for creativity. especially for character design, which is an area I really want to get better at. First, it's important to know and draw the major bones in the body and create a full skeleton. But why is this important? Understanding the skeleton is like having the foundation of a house. You need to know how everything fits together. By studying and sketching the human skeleton, I get a grasp on the proportions and the basic framework of the body. I'm going to practice this by first studying and sketching the human form from references, images, and diagrams. It's important when you study, you keep sketching and keep drawing yourself, because eventually you learn from what you draw, not what you write down. And then I'm going to practice drawing the entire skeleton from memory to reinforce what I've learned. And lastly, I'm going to try and focus on the individual bones to understand their shapes, connections, and purposes. And I'll come back to this function later. But then on to my next sub-goal, which is understanding and drawing major muscle groups and how they follow the skeleton. I talked about how I haven't touched on muscles in my life ever. So it's a really important part. And muscles are what give life and movement to the skeleton. It's what makes people different. If you don't know how muscles work, your figures will just look stiff and unnatural. So I'm gonna approach this by using anatomical references to identify and study major muscle groups. I'll practice layering muscles over my sketches of the skeleton to see how they kind of fit and interact. Then I'll go on to drawing muscle variations on different body types. So more lean people, more muscular people, and more soft figures. Because if you don't know how muscles vary, you can only hold on to one kind of thing you've learned. And I really want to broaden my perspective. And then lastly, I want to study the gender differences in muscle distribution. What are the differences in the male and female muscles? And then the third sub-goal is learning and applying different proportions in ratio in the human body. And this is key for getting a realistic image of how the human form is. And besides, it lays a foundation for later stylization, which I'll talk about in a bit. I'm gonna do this by studying standard human proportion, which I do already have knowledge on, but that is just more from experience, not actually studying it. Then I'm going to draw with those proportions and try to vary it already a bit, so leaning into the stylization. And then the last sub-goal of this main goal of wanting to draw the human form from imagination is understanding the limits of movements in bones and muscles. And I touched upon this earlier, but to draw dynamic and especially believable figures, you need to know how the body moves. If I understand the limits of bones and muscles, I can depict more natural and fluid motion in my drawings. I will learn the range of motion for major joints, such as the shoulder, the hip, and the knee. I'll sketch figures in different poses to see how much muscles contract and stretch. And I'll practice drawing transitional poses to understand how muscles change with movement. Then we are going on to goal 2, and we're gonna tackle the challenge of drawing the human form from all angles and perspectives. This is because art isn't just about what things look like from one side. It's about how they exist in a 3-dimensional space. So for this, I want to master foreshortening and drawing body parts in perspective. Foreshortening is a complex view on perspective, which gives a whole lot of depth and interest to your drawings. And it's a great way to practice what the body and its parts can look like from angles that your eyes don't always understand. I will just start by drawing simple 3D shapes like cylinders and cubes and put them in perspective to build spatial awareness, and then I'll apply that to the different parts of the body, like the arms, the hands, the legs. And then lastly, I will try it on my own without a reference. And then the second sub-goal is drawing the body from all angles. Being able to draw a figure from multiple angles is key for storytelling and character design. And if I can visualize a character from all sides, I can just create more dynamic scenes. And I'm gonna practice this by sketching a neutral standing figure and rotating it. So making a bunch of different views and each time rotating it slightly. I'll draw individual body parts like the head, the torso and limbs from various angles individually. And then lastly, I will utilize 3D models so I can help visualize complex poses and rotations. So I can put all those individual body parts together and how it rotates in a more of a complex setting. And then we are on to goal 3, and that is to draw the human form dynamically. And this is all about capturing movement and energy, which makes my artwork feel alive and more appealing. And the first part of this is to practice quick figure drawing from reference. So I already started with figure drawing, but we're gonna continue doing this. And quick sketches can help my eye and hand coordination. It's gonna allow me to capture like the essence of a pose without getting caught up in details. I'm gonna do these gesture figure drawings sessions with time limits ranging from 30 seconds to 5 minutes. I'll focus on capturing the overall essence and energy of the pose quickly. And after that, it's time for the second sub-goal of drawing the body dynamically. And that is to simplify and stylize body parts for more fluid and expressive drawings. I'm gonna do this by studying artists that are known for their dynamic figure work. And I'm gonna take notes on how they simplify anatomy. And with notes, I mean like drawing notes. If you want to write out notes, that is fine, but keep it minimal. It's not gonna learn you how to draw it. And then next, I'm gonna break down like complex poses into simple lines and shapes that convey movement. Really incorporating these diagonal lines and flow. I'm gonna create and practice exaggerated poses that like push the dynamic aspect of my drawings. So that is my comprehensive study plan. I haven't set strict timelines for myself because I want the flexibility to learn at my own pace. But if you need a structure, I would suggest like dedicating about a week per sub-goal. I think that would be a good approach. That way, in about 8 weeks, you'll have covered all the key areas and will be much closer reaching your drawing goals. But remember, studying anatomy or anything in art takes time and consistent practice. You can't expect to watch a few tutorials, do a couple sketches, and magically reach your goal. Trust the process, trust yourself, and keep practicing. Somewhere down the road, I'll give you an update on my anatomy journey and how it's progressing. And until then, keep drawing, stay patient, and enjoy the process.